Hey everyone, this is Brian Funk. Are you looking for the tools and inspiration to make music? Well, then I invite you to join my Music Production Club. Music Production Club is a monthly subscription service that gets you my newest creations as soon as they are released. You'll also get access to a whole bunch of other stuff the moment you join, including a bunch of Ableton Live materials from presets to templates and devices. There's sample packs, there's educational materials. We have live classes over Zoom where we talk about making music. We have our Discord community where you can connect with other like-minded musicians and talk about production and challenges you may be facing. And there's also special offers and discounts from other companies across the web. On today's show, I have Serik from Hyperbits, and Hyperbits is a music school that is offering members of our Music Production Club their Elevate Ableton Live audio effects. So if you join the Music Production Club in the next 2 weeks, you're going to get the Hyperbits Elevate Pack, which contains 10 Ableton Live audio effect racks that will take your music to the next level. So I invite you to check out the Music Production Club. Go to brianfunk.com/MPC and enjoy the podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I have Serik, aka Hyperbits, and Serik is, well, he has an interesting story because it's a lot like my story in a lot of ways. We grew up on Long Island, kind of barely missed each other, I think. But he's a music producer. He's got a really excellent site for learning music productions called hyperbits.com. And there's a lot of great stuff there, even the blog, if you check that out. I was just reading an article about hitting on Spotify playlists. I thought it had some great advice, practical stuff. I'm really happy to have you here, man. Welcome, Serik.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude. I'm pumped to chat about hopefully all things, music and maybe life, and get into some weird stuff as well. We shall see what comes up.
Yeah, that's kind of how the show goes. On the last episode, I was talking about time travel and black holes and making music.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my guest was, he is a mathematician, producer, but data analyst, and he's making music with black holes. It's very fascinating, slightly over my head, but it's just proof that this show can go wherever it may, and that's usually where a lot of the fun
unfortunately
stuff comes
I don't have too much expertise on the side of black holes, but I did see Interstellar, so Hollywood version of black holes. I could talk about that.
Yeah, well, that's good because neither do I, and I let them know too. So nice. It's good to see you, man. Good to have you here. I think your work is really cool on the site. Like I said, lots of great resources for fellow music producers that they can use to help further their career. And I think you've done an interesting and creative job in carving your own career in music. And I thought maybe, just to start, maybe you can just kind of give people a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, do you want me to start with kind of my artist story, or more like the what kind of turned into the business?
I think so, because that's probably how you got here, right? As an artist first. And I think there is this idea, this kind of traditional idea that that's the way to make music. Like if you tell mom and dad, I want to do music, they think you're trying to be a rock star on stage. And that's really you have more luck getting struck by lightning. Repeatedly.
Yeah, but I did try to go down that route at first, which is worth noting because I think that pursuit was almost second nature. I didn't really think about what it was that I really wanted out of life. I just thought if I could do music, I would be happy. I'll do anything to just pursue music because basically I was working a corporate job, and oh man, dude, it was honestly awful. I worked in a little gray cubicle where I had to stand up to see over it. I didn't really like the people that I was working with. I was actually marketing pharmaceutical conferences, just a very niche topic, which I don't want to hate on healthcare or pharma or anything, but I had no experience in that world. I wasn't passionate about it. I had no idea really about any of that side of things. And I just was doing it because, I got a job out of college and it paid half decently. And I was like, oh, this seems like this is what I've been working towards my whole life, is getting a corporate job or, creating a career or something. And after doing that for a few years, in retrospect, I think I was clinically, actually depressed. I was really just kind of down on myself, felt very pigeonholed. And honestly probably had a little bit of a victim mentality. Like, how could I have worked my whole life just to get to this point where I'm sitting in this office, working for other people, not really caring much about it, life or my work or anything. And, it's also hard to go, I think, in college when you had like 6 months off per year to pursue all like your hobbies and interests. And all of a sudden I had 10 days off per year. Like that, I was like, this doesn't even equate. Like, I don't even understand how it's possible to only have 10 days off per year. So I just kind of like really struggled, I think, for a little while there to figure out what it was that I wanted to do with my life to make, to actually be passionate and happy about stuff. And I ended up kind of on the side, actually learning a little bit about music production. I had always been in a band in high school, so I was sort of just, like interested in that world. But while I had this corporate job, I started taking classes at a NYC-based school called DubSpot. And so I was this marketing manager of this pharma company, whatever. And I had an event that was in Florida at the time. And I told my boss that I couldn't attend the event because I had just started this like DubSpot class or something. So I like literally told my boss, I can't attend something that like is kind of my responsibility because of a hobby of mine, right? And I got laid off like 2 weeks later. Like, it didn't take them much time to be like, okay, this dude's not, super committed, I guess. And so I got laid off. And at that point, I just was like, I don't ever want to be in that position again where I'm just like super unhappy with what I'm doing. So I just decided to like go all in on music, and I didn't care, how much money I was going to make. I was just like, I'm all in. I'm going to figure it out. I want to be a touring, DJ, electronic music producer. This is back in like 2012. And it took me, a few years to like kind of build up that, I guess like resume or just, start playing shows, building a SoundCloud following, getting supported by certain DJs and doing remixes for artists. But I had like a little, good go at it, I guess, a good little run where I got hooked up with these guys, these A&Rs that worked at Universal and Island Def Jam, and they started managing me for a little while. And there was this one point where, do you remember Hype Machine? Did you ever like use Hype Machine or?
Is this like for like artists to get their songs out there? It sounds vaguely familiar.
Sort of.
Like a
Hype Machine was this aggregate like blog music player. So it'd take all the like blogs that were just, different blogs writing about different songs, like what came out. And then Hype Machine would aggregate it all into one place, and you could just basically like stream through all the different music that's being talked about. But what it became was almost like an industry like perspective on who's popular right now, because all these indie bloggers and all these like, underground electronic musicians, everybody's talking about these different acts on these blogs. And then Hype Machine would aggregate it all at one time, and it would have like a rating system. So to get to number one on Hype Machine, like people would pay attention to who you were. And so at that point I was doing a bunch of remixes. And I remember at one point I was actually sitting at my parents' dinner table, just like having dinner on like a Tuesday or something. And I had just released a remix. I forget which remix it was, but I think it might've been a side project of mine that I had. And we did this remix for either like Kanye West or Nico and Vinz or something. And we were number one in the world, like on Hype Machine right at that point. And literally I got an email in my inbox from like an A&R at Warner Brothers. I got another email from another dude at Sony. I got another, like literally that night, just like 3 different A&Rs from all these major labels were just emailing me being like, yo, we'd love to work with you. Like send us some music. So it's kind of, I feel like that was sort of like the peak, I guess, of my like artist career, because then at that point, I tried to like, start touring a little bit. And I don't know, touring is one thing if you're the biggest artist in the world or something and you're flying private jets. But when you're grinding and working hard, I just found it actually really difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sort of like, once the touring started and I didn't love it, I was like, wait, I've been working this whole time, all these years to be a musician and to, get to this point where I can play shows, and I didn't even love it. Like once it happened. I kind of like at that point pivoted and sort of went into the more like education, music, business space as a result. Because you obviously want to like if I was trying to do something that I was happy with or proud of or just content with, and I couldn't even enjoy myself once I got to that point, I was like, okay, I got to reassess here a little bit.
Sounds like that must have been a difficult moment for you, especially because it's kind of the second time you felt that, but now it's with something that you love, that you are passionate about.
It's actually that's a really good point. It's like I didn't even realize that it kind of was the second time until just now, like telling you about it, because it's almost the same feeling. Like you don't know what to do with yourself. But I think at that point I did know what I wanted to do. I just didn't know in what way it was going to materialize. Because I knew I wanted to do something with music. I just didn't necessarily want to be, a touring DJ at that point.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience with touring anyway. Playing shows, we booked our own tours as a band, and we got in the car and drove down to Miami and back. And we did that, I think, 3 different times. They were like 2-week shots each. And it was a lot of fun, like some of the most fun times I've had. But at the end, I was like, all right, that's enough for a while. I'm good. Like I've been living out of a car, trying to eat well, trying to stay healthy, and not doing very good at it. And just being glad it's over, but then thinking like, the reality of this is, if this is something we were really going to do, it's not 2 weeks. It's pretty much it's 10 days off. It's kind of like the cubicle thing, but in reverse, where I'll be touring all that time and get maybe just a little bit of time off. And it did occur to me that like, I don't know if I really want that. I love playing in a band, love playing shows, but everything else is very hard work and very strenuous on, your mind, your body, and everything, your relationships.
Totally. And that's kind of an interesting point too, because like, like what is success and what is it worth to some people? Because like, to me, success is just waking up every day and being happy and, figuring out what you want to do. But if you get to this point where you're like basically sacrificing, like you said, your body or your mind just to like get to this, this idea of a successful artist or a successful, brand or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, like to me, it's just not really worth it. But also I'm not that type of person that's really like, I guess, built maybe for that type of lifestyle. Like I really credit those people who are okay with like not knowing where their next paycheck comes from and maybe are not of need of that like more rigid routine type lifestyle. For me, I really love routine. I actually really love, kind of like knowing what's going on in my life. And I just wasn't really, I think, cut out for that like truly artistic lifestyle where you just really have no idea what's coming next,
I like staying at home a little too much.
Yeah.
I do. I like having dogs, having relationship, and those are things like that they're the cost, and everything does have a cost that where you don't always see that, when you see the success stories and you see how fun it is. Or if you were to just isolate on the time when you're actually playing the show, then it's amazing. It's great. But there's a lot of other stuff that goes with it. And it's good you realize that though, because I think it's easy to get swept away in it, especially if, you've got A&R people and you've got support. I think I'm lucky that I never had that, because I don't know if I would have been able to say like, walk away from it, because I think I would know how incredibly rare and crazy it is that I got the chance, that I think I would have probably put up with it and at my own, suffering.
Yeah.
Because it was, that's a really big deal to get that kind of interest in what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think I did to some extent for a while, like put up with it. I think we all kind of reach or hit our own breaking points. And like, I'm actually kind of fascinated about the topic of change, because it's like you can go, it's like the person who wants to lose weight or something, but they've their whole lives, they've just been overeating or whatever. And then all of a sudden they just hit a point where they're like, I'm done, you know? And like that change actually happens in an instant. And for me, like I was like tolerating this. I was putting up with it. I was trying to make it work. I mean, like you said, like there was all these opportunities sort of on the table. And I felt like I had done the hardest work already, right? Like getting to this point, I felt like the next tier wouldn't have been as difficult maybe to, I guess, like, you know, reach or accomplish or whatever. But I reached my breaking point when one of my production partners tried to sue me, which, you know, I don't even know if I need to get into the details of that, you know, but long story short, you know, like I was like, man, like I just can't make this work. Like here we are, we're at this point where like so much lies in front of us and I can't even get along with like one other, you know, musician to try to make this like, you know, like it's only going to get more serious and there's only going to be more things at play. There's only going to be more money on the table. There's only going to be more like responsibility. And we couldn't even make it work in that like kind of more simplistic state. So once he kind of like did that, you know, I got these like papers in the mail, like a cease and desist letter for my own artist project from my partner at the time. I was just like, yeah, I like that was enough to motivate me to be like, okay, like I don't think this is in the cards for me. And I could have fought through it and I could have kept going. But like you were saying, I think there is something really special about the people who like love music enough that they're willing to tolerate like anything and all things to like get to their end goal. Turns out I thought I was that person, but I wasn't. Like I'm much actually more, I think, balanced and content living a life that's a little bit more like, you know, behind the scenes. Like I still get to be forward facing with students and work with, you know, other musicians. And I'm really excited about making music these days. So I'm working with other artists, but, you know, yeah, not having to sort of be that like quote unquote life of the party, like DJ frontman thing, and putting like, you know, all my livelihood out on the line all the time, I think it's a better fit for me and my personality.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I didn't think about it that way because the DJ is, you know, the life of the party kind of figure. and to have to be that all the time would be certainly exhausting.
Yeah, but I also think some of that was like self-imposed, you know? Like, I don't think a DJ has to be the life of the party. I think that in my own immaturity at the time, that's what I thought that a role of a DJ had to be, right? So I thought it was my responsibility to like get drunk and to stay out late and to like go to the after parties. And in retrospect, like if I was ever doing that stuff again or going on any sort of tours again, like I would treat it much, much more like a business and, you know, just like be more kind of, I guess, mature about how I went about it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's too many stories of that not lasting long for people, you know, one way or another.
Totally.
Lifestyle's
yeah,
rough.
it's like it's a tale as old as time, right? Like the rock star that
the 27 club type
yeah,
of
exactly,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's great though that you were able to figure that out about yourself and even despite all that stuff. But I guess, yeah, sometimes like something crazy comes up like that, like, you know, my partner's suing me. Like this too, I have to deal with this too, would just put you over the edge. But I guess in a lot of ways it was sort of a good thing for you in the long run because of where you are now.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. And I mean, I really think that's the case with anything. Like, I don't know if we were to get a little weird on some topics, like I sort of believe in predeterminism, you know, like I think the way that it was the only way that it ever could have been. Like, I don't think there's any alternative, you know, dimensions that like, or at least in this reality, like that's the only option that could have happened because based on like my genetics, my upbringing, my experiences, like I made the best decisions that I possibly could in those moments. And that's really it. So like I once I kind of, and a lot of this is like from Sam Harris. I don't know if you follow him at all.
Yeah, free will. He talks about this a lot. Like,
yeah, the whole free will thing.
Free will. The illusion.
Yeah, like we basically we don't have free will, and a lot of people get very destabilized by that. But I actually found it very freeing because now I look back at my life and I'm like, oh, I can't regret that decision because that's the only decision that I could have ever have made. And at least with something like this, where the outcome ends up being somewhat positive anyway, it's super easy. But even like the negative things, like for all I know, like maybe if we had, kept going, like we're a super successful touring act and living the dream or whatever that I think most musicians and artists want to live. But I don't know. I think it's really easy to look at regrets and sort of like hate on yourself for them, where I'm really looking at it like, hey, it's all good. It's got me to this place now. And I'm actually like, I love my life. I truly enjoy so much about what I do. And I feel so like blessed and grateful for kind of like the ability to not just work for myself, but work for myself in music. Like I feel like that is a very rare thing to do. And I don't know. I just feel really grateful for all those like good times and bad times, because that's exactly what led me here.
Yeah, I think if you adopt that belief, that was what you were going to do no matter what. It was just you were set up, maybe not you're set up, but just like all of the contributing factors ultimately brought you to this point where you were going to make that decision. That's it. Is kind of comforting in that it allows you to look at the things that happen to you as part of the story instead of like part of the downfall, maybe. Like it's like what you have to work with, what you have to build off of, and it becomes like part of who you are and makes you into the next thing you will become. So it's I can understand the idea too, where like this idea of like maybe we don't have any control over what happens to us. It could be scary, but it's also comforting in that like you still have these choices, but you're building it off of the things that have already happened, and it might have saved you a lot of trouble in the long run, by having the problems here. But the same with me. And when I look back, a lot of it makes sense, but at the time it doesn't. But sometimes I think you make it make sense. You use it as part of the piece.
Yeah, because you can sort of create any narrative or any story for yourself, really. And we really don't know at the end of the day why things really happen. I mean, it honestly reminds me, like I'm a single dude right now. It reminds me a lot about like dating. Like I don't know why certain people sometimes react the way they do, why sometimes I might go out on a date with some girl, right? And it like goes great. And then next thing I know, like they're ghosting, right? Like it could be 1,001 things. It could be that, like I could be, I don't know, hateful on myself or angry at like something that I thought I said or did, but I have no idea. It could just be her own loaded past, her own, trauma or something that caused her to react that way. And so and honestly, it happens a lot in business, right? Like sometimes partnerships, things like that just don't work out. And, to take my own advice of what I'm saying right now, like when I think back about like the getting sued by my own production partner, like that says so much more about him than it does about me. And I can create 1,001 stories about why he did this or why he didn't do something else, but I'll never really know. And even if I asked him, he probably might not give me like a truly honest answer, So I try my best to like remove myself from the stories that I'm telling myself and the things that we sort of like use to justify why things happen, because you just kind of don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just this thing we make up in our heads. And I've found myself, especially when it comes to like teaching, I've found myself sometimes it's like the night before school or something, and I'll just start thinking like, what am I doing tomorrow? How am I going to do this? And the thought starts happening, and then I start going down the like rabbit hole of like, you don't know what you're doing, man. You're way over your head. Everybody's fooled. So they're gonna find you out sooner or later, and on and on and on. And I'm just like, I think of it like I'm watching a movie now. Like I'm watching the movie of I'm a Terrible Person, part 807. And if I can catch myself watching that movie, I can say, all right, let's stop the DVD or the VHS or whatever and eject it and put a different one in. Because that's all it is. It's the only place it's happening is in my own head, is in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, that's like super, I think, almost like the word I guess I'm coming up with is woke of you, just because, like essentially that's imposter syndrome, right? Like to some degree, but we don't have to associate with our own thoughts. Like whether or not we are aware of it or not, like thoughts just arise, right? Like you don't have to associate with them. And so what you're doing when those come up, and by kind of putting this like analogy that you just put on it, you're disassociating yourself from your own thoughts, which is that's like an incredible skill set. Like I think a lot of people don't do that, and they really identify with every single thought that comes up, but our brains are just firing out thoughts all the time. Like for anyone who's meditated, right? Like you could sit down and whether you intend to or not, things are going to come up. And what's cooler, I think, is that we don't even know what's going to come up next, right? Like we can't control our next thought. If we could, we'd be mind readers, you know, like we're only just responding to stimulus. So whatever reason, like, you know, thoughts just essentially come up. And I love that you're basically able to like, take that thought and then recognize it as just what it is, a thought, instead of like your own identity.
Well, most of the time I'm hypnotized by it and I don't even know I'm thinking, you know. That's what meditation's actually helped me with, is like noticing I'm thinking. Because most of the time I'm just thinking without even knowing. I'm playing out these
just
stories.
Putting like a quick label on it. It's like, oh, that's a me having a thinking thought.
Imaginary conversation in the future with somebody and what I should say and how it should go, and all of this nonsense is just like going on. It's a fairy tale, though. It's not real.
Yep.
One of my favorite quotes, it actually comes from Hamlet by Shakespeare. And I teach English, but I'm not like a crazy Shakespeare guy or anything. But Hamlet's friends show up to try to like cheer him up. And they're like talking about how beautiful Denmark is. And Hamlet's miserable because his dad died and his uncle married his mom, and he found out that the uncle killed his dad, and you know, all this crazy, horrible drama. And they're saying how beautiful Denmark is, and Hamlet's like, there's neither good or bad in a thing, but thinking makes it so. So it's like, you only think that because of, that's your opinion. You know, things are just things. It's how we think about the things. And if I can keep that in mind, and it helps with like, you know, your stories from the past, like the failures, the obstacles you face, if you can decide almost that, okay, this was a helpful thing for me.
And I think
just
doing that, like
story.
And doing that in like a, you know, somewhat rational way, like not being like blindly like if, you know, sometimes something happens and it's just awful, right? Like sometimes things just do suck, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something positive about it, while also recognizing that something is negative about it. And keeping those thoughts positive, I think is, I don't know, for me, one of probably one of the toughest struggles is just to consistently stay positive, but I take it like super seriously because I know that, you know, that the worst version of myself can easily be so pessimistic and negative, and I don't want to allow that voice to like win, because that's, for whatever reason, maybe just the default state of most human brains. You know, we got to be super critical for our survival and for whatever reason. But I try to not let that voice win, you know?
Well, I did see an article somewhere. I love stories that start out like that. I read an article once, but it was about like people, they did a survey of people, I guess. I don't know how they did this study, but the pessimist people, the people that identified as pessimist, tended to live longer than optimists, but the optimists were happier in their life. So I guess the idea is, if you're a pessimist, you're always thinking about what's going to go wrong, so you're prepared, you're planning for it, which makes a lot of sense, like from a survival Darwinian perspective, that, okay, if you're prepared, you're probably the one that's going to be able to have kids and pass on your genes, compared to the happy-go-lucky, you know, guy that just gets like eaten by the lion because he thinks everything's cool. So it's like a good thing to have too, just to, when it is happening, to recognize it as like, all right, well, that is a helpful thing. Maybe I don't want to totally buy into it all the time, but because I found myself like beating myself up for being negative about things. Like, stop! What do you know better? You know, like you're an idiot. And then now I'm being like, I'm like an optimistic asshole. You know?
Yeah,
so
I like that, optimistic asshole.
Yeah, it's weird. It's so much, man, everything is just, it's all your thoughts really. And it all, even when we're talking about like making music and doing all this stuff, everything is just a thought. If I'm making a track and I'm saying like, this isn't good enough, this is dumb, that's just me thinking that. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people working on something and I thought myself like, nah, that's not a good idea. I would never do that. You know, what is that? And then a day or two later you hear it, you're like, oh my God, it's a masterpiece. You know, I love this.
Yeah. And these thoughts, right? These kind of I guess dealing with this monkey mind of ours, this responsive reactionary mind, like this is a lot of what we sort of, I guess, teach in the Hyperbits Masterclass, like how to combat this. Because for me, like we've all kind of been through, like, have you ever seen the what is it? The Project Lifeline of an artist? It's from Steal Like an Artist. Which I'm blanking on the
I love that book, the little tiny one. I think it has a lot of illustrations.
Exactly. Yeah, there's
Did he
this
do
one
that on napkins originally or something?
I think that's probably where it started. He was probably just doodling and
I don't remember
drawing.
what you're talking about specifically, but I did read the book.
Well, it's kind of like this lifeline of a project. That's what it is. Lifeline of a project, and it basically starts. It's like a graph, right? It just kind of starts going down, but you start off. You have an idea, and it's like, oh, this is the best idea ever, right? Like, I can't wait to work on this song. Like, this is going to be the one, right? And you start working on it, and then you're like, oh, well, this is going to be a little harder than I thought, right? Because you just start running into some problems or maybe a little creative block. Then you get into like the real thick of it, right? And you're trying to work on this song. You start comparing it to maybe a few of your favorite artists. You're like, holy shit, this is nowhere near as good as that stuff. And you start to get really frustrated. You're not really having as much fun anymore. And then you have like the dark night of the soul, right? Where you're just like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, I don't even deserve to be making music. Like, I'm a fraud. I'm awful at this, right? You just completely berate yourself and are super negative about whatever it is that you're creating. And maybe at that point you take a break or a couple days off or something, and eventually you come back to it and you're like, this isn't like terrible. It's not good, but I'm not like hating on it as much anymore. And maybe I'll just finish this. And then eventually, you put a little bit more effort into it and it like finishes back up. And it's nowhere near as high as that original graph or dot on the graph that said that this was the best idea ever. But, you finish it and you're like, it's okay. It's not the best thing ever, but it's half decent. And like that sort of progression for me is like the goal then is to just get through that dark night of the soul as fast as possible or to avoid it altogether. And to do that, I think you have to like learn how to kind of deal with your mind and learn how to like basically fight through those persistent, nagging, negative thoughts that most artists, I think, have to deal with, and there's a lot of different, I guess, like strategies and things that artists can do to combat that. But it all starts with recognizing that, like, at least I think working fast is more important than like sitting down and just spending like years or, months and months, like trying to finish an idea. Like, get through them as fast as possible because the quality of a work is not directly correlated with how much time you spend on something. In fact, it actually may even get worse over time.
You've described like every hour of my life. I feel great. Oh, I feel terrible. I go through that a lot. It's a good reason to do something before you're really ready too, because you are psyched about it and you don't know how deep it's going to get, and if you can get the momentum going early, because I've overthought things like crazy and never got started. And I had this idea, and then the excitement will just drain out of it anyway if you don't start it.
Yeah.
But when you have that like moment of excitement to dive right in, because it is fleeting. But yes, I think pretty much everything I've ever done has gone through that kind of curve. I just did a podcast about this, but just by myself, the Dunning-Kruger effect. It was like 2 or 3 episodes ago. And that one is about how we learn. And it's almost the same thing. Like when you first learn something, like I did this with guitar. I first learned guitar. I was like, oh, right, I know how to play guitar. I can do power chords. I can play anything. I'm the best. And I don't even have any idea how much goes into it until I start doing it longer and longer. Then you realize, oh my God, I don't know anything. And your confidence just drops all the way. But then as you progress, you do get back up, but you arrive at a place that's not quite as high because you now know how complicated everything is. So you're never quite as confident in your work as that one small spot where you just started learning something and you think you have it all figured out before you realize how much more there is to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I think like knowing that, right? If you're aware that eventually you're going to have these soul-sucking, horrible moments of doubt, for one, having a community to talk through those moments, right? It doesn't always have to be about music. Just this is also what group therapy is about, right? Just having support in those moments because they will pass, right? And recognizing that whatever idea you're working on right now, sure, maybe it isn't the best idea in the world, but you can always start a new, fresh idea. And I think learning how to finish, instead of always just accumulating new ideas, idea after idea and not finishing them, gets an artist into a very hazy or sticky pattern. You want to be able to finish ideas and get through that dark night of the soul, kind of as fast as possible. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of different ways to, I think, do that. But I think the idea that quantity, because that's something we basically teach in the school, is that you should be making more tracks than most people realize. So we believe in quantity over quality. And in fact, quality is actually achieved through quantity. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, for some reason, there's this expectation, I think, in music that, because I think maybe we all picture the artist from the 80s or 70s or something like Led Zeppelin, right? They would probably sit down and bury themselves into a cave and work on an album for 2 years and emerge this with this masterpiece, And so people think that that's what making music is like. But what it really is sitting down and getting to work every single day and actually on short deadlines, making a track every week or every couple of days. And then, from that, you start to gauge what is really good about your songs or what is actually the more quality piece. And you probably make a ton of music, then you actually only pick a handful of those songs to showcase to the world. And if you think about it outside of music, someone who's writing a short story, for example, actually here, I'll pose the question. Who's a better writer? The dude who takes 1 full year to write one short story, right? Or the dude who wrote a different short story every single day for 365 days. At the end of that year, who's more well-versed at writing, or who can create the better work? Sure, maybe that one piece that one guy made could be half decent, but at the end, I think it's obvious, right? When you think of it that way, that person constantly creating, activating the muscle of creation and finishing, that's going to be the more prolific writer or artist,
reps,
right?
Yeah. Way more reps. And I think too, it saves you from getting too precious about anything also. If you're doing the one short story, the one song a year, it has to be good. And there's all that pressure and you're going to really question yourself. You're going to have a long, dark night of the soul on that.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Cause if there's a lot of pressure on yourself, you're probably not even going to be creating at your optimal, state. It's because creating art is not life or death, as much as we probably like to think that every now and then, right? It's not a life or death thing, and there's no reason to put that level of pressure on yourself.
Yeah, sometimes it's fun to remind yourself that you're doing this kind of silly activity, and it's a pure luxury, because if you took away some of our basic needs, you wouldn't be able to do it. It was just...
Yeah, music producers don't have too much, stake in the zombie apocalypse. We really wouldn't be of much value,
No, not at all. But I think when you are just kind of doing something more and more often, like you said, 365 days a year, you can really try some weird things out. And if it fails, it fails. It's garbage. Who cares? You've got another day tomorrow. And I use the same philosophy in my English classes. One of the big grades I give them is a notebook grade. And I always like try to say, I'm not mixing this up. I grade it on quantity, not quality, because my goal with them is like, the more you write, the better you get at it. That's just like plain and simple. So the more pages you put in your notebook, the better your grade will get. And they're like, so I can write about it. I'm like, you can write anything you want. I don't even care. I just want you putting the pen to the paper, just going through the process over and over again. And
that's a really cool way to go about grading it. Do you ever get like these students who then just go like above and beyond and sort of have just written like an insane amount?
Yeah, some of them do. And it's a great lesson too, in just like grit and like consistency. Because, when I was younger, if I think back to like the first thing I really loved to do was like play baseball. And for a little while there, I wanted to be on the New York Mets, And
you already picked the wrong team, man.
Well, it was like the 80s, so they were good back then.
Yeah, they were good.
The Yankees were pretty horrible back then. But that all switched. But that's what I wanted to do, basically, until I realized how much baseball that actually meant I'd have to play. Then I let go of that. But I was kind of naturally good, I think. I don't know, I just knew maybe I practiced enough, or I was also tall. So I had some advantages, I think. So I was just good. So I think it came to me easier. I did work a lot at it. I played it all the time, but music was different for me. And when I started playing guitar just before 9th grade, I didn't know a damn thing about music. And I didn't even know that if I had a guitar, I could play the songs that I heard on the radio. I didn't know that was possible. And I don't know what I thought rock stars were. Like they were just like superheroes, basically. But when I found that out and then started playing guitar, I just kind of made it a goal, not really knowing how wise I was being, but I'm going to play the guitar every day, even if it's just a few minutes. I just wanted to build a streak. And that like consistent effort taught me a lot, because I started to learn how to play guitar and I was getting better, and noticeably. And that was so empowering to learn that. And I think you can go. I went till I was in 9th grade before I realized that you can actually learn stuff like by putting in the time. And that helped me then, like with like exercise, like realizing like, all right, if I do this every day, maybe that'll help. And it just translated into like everything.
Yeah. I mean, learning how to learn is sort of like a big part of the puzzle. And I actually think, again, to reference Steal Like an Artist, it's Austin Kleon. I just realized my bookshelf is right to my right. I could look there. But Austin Kleon says, like he has this thing called like a creative calendar, which the whole purpose of the creative calendar is exactly what you're saying, like to not break the chain. Like how many days in a row can you actually sit down and create? Because it's not about these like marathon sessions. It's about showing up every single day and just putting in, even if it's just an hour, like an hour of creation every single day is much more valuable than like, a 6-hour session or even a 10-hour session on the weekends or something. And yeah, so that's, I feel like probably why you got good at these different like pursuits is just out of like consistency or persistency, right? I
think so. And I could foresee a possible timeline or alternate universe version of myself that didn't learn guitar and never learned that lesson into adulthood. I mean, I got like B's without working so hard in high school, just did my homework really. I didn't really push myself at all. So I wouldn't have learned it there. I don't know where I would have learned that if it wasn't through guitar, because I really did come in to music with no knowledge of anything. And that was my blessing, because I didn't know how much I didn't know. Yeah.
It's that naivete that like kind of guides you a bit. And I think
I just put my finger here and do it like, oh, that's it? That's playing music? Okay. And that was all I thought it was for a long time.
I mean, I think that guided me a lot in like, yes, in music for sure. Just like when I started out on the production side of things, like I was like, how hard could this be? Like I've been playing in bands, like this is probably the easy stuff. Little did I know there's a whole like another world, right? That you have to learn as a musician to be a music producer. But then even with the music like business that I started, Having a business is 1,000 times, I think, more complicated than I ever could have imagined. And I'm actually really glad that I didn't know that, because I'm not totally sure that I would have really done the work had I known just how much there was. But instead, that naivete and just kind of pushing forward and hoping for the best was like a good thing.
Yeah, that not knowing what you're doing sometimes is like the best thing, because if I knew better, there's probably a lot of things in my life I never would have done if I knew I was getting involved in.
Yeah,
but a lot of the things I've been able to do, I think I started just kind of early, and you can always, like I saw I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk had a podcast that just came out today, and I didn't listen to it, but I saw his title. It was like Perfectionism is an excuse not to start, which you would think like, no, what? But again, it's just like because everything has to be perfect. And I've done that in other things where I've just thought like, once I figure that out, then I'll learn this. And you basically never do it. It's a way to avoid doing it.
Yeah, I think perfectionism is one of the key things that holds a lot of artists back. Because if you're sitting down and I think everyone's done this, right, where they like create a song and then they're like, oh, but it's not good enough yet. And then you start tweaking and changing and like manipulating and like, oh, like if I just change this, oh, I could try this new chord progression. I could mix this a little better. I mean, it could technically never stop. And I used to be this guy where I would like work on one song for like months and months and just like keep tweaking it. And like, what am I trying to do at that point? Like tweaking a snare, right, isn't going to be like the end all be all of some like production or song that I created. And it really is also, I think, almost like a perfectionist is just afraid to let go of their work, right? It's like, it's a curse, because it just means that like, hey, until I have proclaimed that like every single element of this track is perfect, like I'm not going to show it to the world. It's your ego actually like trying to compensate for the fact that you think that this isn't good enough. And I don't really like, I think to some degree we have to have our own taste, and we have to like understand, or believe like what is good about our music, what's not. But at the end of the day, like we don't even get to decide that, because we're not the listeners. We're just creating a vibe and putting it out there and, seeing what resonates. Actually, John Mayer talks about this in some graduation speech he gave. He talked about how he just made this album, and he, has this body of work, and he thinks this one song on it is going to be the hit, right? The single. The label thinks it's going to be this other song, right? And then when they actually start releasing the songs on the album, like it was a completely different track. And he makes the point, he's like, who's the expert? It's not him. I mean, yeah, he made the song, but no one really knows what's going to resonate. So I think getting it out there and just putting out those vibes is more important than holding on to perfection or the idea of perfection, because perfection doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, and that's kind of proof like you can't control the outcome as much as you want. You can try, but you can't. But you can control the effort you put in and the work you put into it. I think that's a problem too. Just getting back to one of the things you said earlier, like with YouTube, the internet, there's infinite resources to learn stuff, which is great. But the problem is there's also infinite resources to learn stuff from, which means you can really get obsessive over things, and you can start, you got to do the snare this way, and then you watch 4 more videos and you got like 18 more ideas you have to put on that snare drum, and then you'll do something else, and then there's all the opinions of like all kinds of people, some of them right, some of them wrong, some of them somewhere in the middle, where you can't make a track without a snare that has no compressor on it, whatever, how could you not have a tube compressor running? There's just so much you can run into. It's hard to filter out the noise, the good stuff, especially when you're in the early stages where you don't know what you don't know. So the experience of just getting through it, I think it's never going to be perfect anyway. And a lot of the stuff I love the best is imperfect. Sometimes it's perfectly imperfect, but any music I hear actually that sounds perfect, I don't connect with. It's like too clean, too polished, too in tune, too in time, and doesn't move you as much. That's the weird thing about music.
I think that a lot of time that music producers spend, or at least what I try to spend a lot of time on, is actually making my music less perfect, you know? Because if it, I mean, on the most like basic fundamental level, if you create a track with like everything's exactly on beat, there's no swing, right? There's no like off, you know, just any facet of the production is even slightly off. Like you've created this like very rigid and robotic and, you know, MIDI sounding production. It's like when we play MIDI, like when you download a chord progression of some song and you're like, yeah, I get that it's like the melody of this like Killer's track or something, but it sounds like phony and fake. It's because it's robotic. And so what I love to spend a lot of time on is actually programming in those imperfections. Like, do you use the Sound Toys bundle at all?
I don't have the bundle. I've got Little Echo Boy, or maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they're all really
Sound
great.
Toys, they make great stuff. I just don't happen to have them.
Yeah, I just bring them up because they actually have like randomized tools or parameters inside their plugins so that you can actually have just like truly random. I guess they're algorithmically random, but they're random enough that they're not on like the grid, or you can slightly, you know, just drag the delay sequence like on Echo Boy or speed up the delay sequence, right? So that it's just off of the grid. And these little imperfections make things human. And I feel like, without doing that stuff, then our music just ends up being too, like you said, too rigid, and it doesn't, you know, it's tough to relate to or resonate with.
Yeah, when I first started recording on a computer, I thought all my problems were solved. And the first thing I remember doing was recording drum sounds and just putting them on the grid. You know, I record a bunch of kicks, just put the kicks down, put the snares down. Everything's right on the grid. I'm like, perfect, you know? All my drumming is like a little off and sloppy here and there, but not anymore. And then the music just, you know, it just felt like it was moving along like so steady and perfect. And I was like, what now? You know? So I now find myself doing exactly that. I'm trying to like bring back all the things that used to be problems, like in almost like an artificial way, or try to find some new way to have these things come up naturally, because it's part of what makes the charm, part of what makes the magic.
Yeah, and I think that is the best music, is the stuff that combines a little bit of both, right? Like some of that, you know, the possibilities with like production and polish and some, you know, elements of perfection, right? Combine that with that human, organic, like just experimental vibe of whether it's an actual instrument or a human voice or whatever it is. Like put those things together, and like to me, that's the most exciting type of music I think being created out there right now. And it's the stuff that I'm most excited about, you know?
Yeah, well, that's got like a little bit of the future and a little bit of the past. And I mean, I love music technology. I mean, when new stuff comes out, oh boy, I can't wait to try that. And it's so fun to see what's happening, what's new. Or when like a band comes out and they've done something interesting, or an artist, whatever, you know, that's fun and exciting. But a lot of it can also kind of, you know, steal the soul out of it, I guess. And we lose the feeling of it. So it's a tricky balance to find. Yeah. But when it's done right.
I mean, some people never find it. I mean, it truly is difficult. But to me, that's what makes this whole thing exciting. Like just playing instruments live, incredibly talented musicians. There's a lot of great stuff about that, but it doesn't excite me the way that, you know, when you take those organic instruments and then you can manipulate them and do all these incredible things on the computer, like it really is blending the new world and the old. And there's a lot of just, I don't know, potential there. And it excites me, which at the end of the day is really all that we're doing here, is just like finding ways to get excited and then replicating that. Right.
Right. Yeah. We're playing with emotions, really. I try to always remember that when I'm doing stuff. I'm looking for emotional impact. And if that means it's sloppier, or if that means it's cleaner because you can hear it and feel it more, it's tough to sometimes make those decisions, but that's always the thing I try to keep in mind: emotional impact.
Yeah,
it's got to feel like something, because otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, and I feel like one of the things that, because I do have a lot of experience, obviously, with just a vast array of students in the music production space because of the classes that we teach. But I feel like one of the things that actually separates some of the, the students that I can tell are just like very much like beginning amateur style sound versus the ones who like have a little bit more potential or are just making incredible sounding stuff is that like kind of exactly what you said, like creating those emotional moments, like actually taking the music and manipulating it to the point like where, maybe this little break or this silence like makes this drop or this chorus that much more impactful or exciting. The people who just kind of leave things alone and like think that the impact is going to come just through the song itself, I think have trouble understanding how much you can do in the production sense to make your music like stand out and have some of those special moments.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard because you have to make sacrifices. You have to make it a little weaker over here so it can feel more powerful there. And I know my temptation, my leanings are always, I want every sound to be like amazing and powerful. Like the bass is going to be huge, the drums are going to be huge, the guitar's going to be huge. And if everything's huge, then everything's just normal. It's just all the same. So in order to get that huge drum sound, I have to maybe do something somewhere else, give it something small to be next to.
Yeah, I remember there was this this producer who's really killing it right now. He's a friend of mine, Jason Ross, and he was actually teaching kind of earlier in his production career for a little bit, and he was giving this class and he was working through one of his songs, and all the students were just like, holy shit, man, like how did you get this one like reverb delay section to sound so stereo? Like, is there some crazy panning happening? Is there some sort of like plug-in manipulation? And he like honestly told me later, he's like, dude, I felt kind of like guilty. Like I didn't do anything. Like it's just everything in the song was mono up until that point, pretty much down the middle, right? And so when this moment happens, when this big release of like, vocals and delay and hanging out like on the stereo image like appears to the listener for the first time, it feels so stereo because of what preceded it. But I think it's kind of funny that, sometimes we think that these are production like tips or techniques when in reality it's just, comparing a prior moment to what happened after, right? It's just, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like, it's dynamics, right? It's differences.
Yeah, differences, yeah. Yeah, and we get used to what we're hearing real fast. Like you just sort of accept it. The first time I think I ever noticed it was in 1979 by the Smashing Pumpkins. You know that tune?
I love that song.
Yeah, it's a great song. And in the beginning, you've got like a little drum beat and the guitar, but no bass yet. And it goes through like a whole like verse without it. And you just get comfortable with it. It sounds nice. It's, great melodies. It lets you first appreciate that, right? And then on the next part of the verse, the bass comes in and the drums fill out a little more. It's just like, it just feels so much better.
Yeah, it's so fulfilling, yeah.
If it would have started with everything in the beginning, it would have been great. But you miss that extra level, that extra step. And it's worth remembering like how easily we just kind of get like, we accept it. You hear it a couple seconds and you just accept this is the reality of this world of the song. And if then you say, but we're going here. If you save here for later, the wide stuff, the low stuff, the high stuff, whatever it is, it can be like really impactful. I think that's the kind of stuff that gives you the chills when you listen to it. Totally.
Exactly. And I find that the decisions to do something like that like requires a lot of like patience, on the artist side. Like it's not easy to say, hey, we're not going to have a bass play this whole first verse, right? Because you want that full feeling. But it honestly takes some maturity. But yeah, if you can like try to really design right? Like design those moments to feel more special, right? Like those are the things that, at least for me as a listener, like really get me to latch on to stuff. I'm sure there are some commercial listeners out there who like don't really care about that stuff, but I think the majority of people, really latch on to those little moments like that.
I think they feel it if they don't know what's happening. Like you feel it. I think a lot of good things that you can do in your music are felt more than noticed, more than heard.
Right.
You just widening the stereo mix in a chorus is a great example. Like no one really notices that, but you feel it. You don't notice like, oh, they're really not using all the stereo field here in this verse, but you feel it when it opens up in the next section.
Yeah, and maybe some music producers can be aware of that, but the general population like just can't articulate why those moments are feeling so special to them. But it's they're definitely feeling it. That's a good point.
I'm grateful again for my sort of like late coming into music, because I can remember hearing music before I played guitar and then after I played it. And before I played guitar, it was just like music and singing. Maybe beat music, singing. But after I started playing guitar, I started hearing different guitars. I heard the clean guitar, the distorted guitar, the acoustic guitar. Oh, that's the bass guitar. Okay. And then that only opened up even more when I got into recording and producing, when you're like, oh, rap, listen to that. There's a tambourine in there. That's why it gets like a little, you just start hearing it different because you're with it and you're getting deep. But what percentage of like your listeners are actually producers or musicians even? That's probably much higher, musicians, but producers, it's such a small, is it even 1%? Like, so most people aren't tuned into that. They're kind of, I assume they're hearing, music and voice, or drums, music and voice. So, you have to sort of think that way too when you're doing it. And that's hard because, you can't like separate yourself from yourself.
And this is why when I am like trying to finish a song, I do actually purposefully give myself like a few days off from listening to it, because that's the closest you'll really ever get to being able to listen to your own music, like in that commercial sense. Like I'll never get to hear my own song, right? Like for the first time, because I've been there through the whole process, and it's like,
it's coming, and
and I it's like, if I can just try to avoid listening to it for a little while, then I can like at least sit down and listen to it and be like, okay, like this is what it feels like somewhat to be able to hear it for the first time. And then you can kind of tap into that mindset of like what it might be like to be a commercial listener listening to your own music. And then you can make maybe a few final decisions to help that side of things. Maybe think of things a little bit more globally. Maybe, notice that this one moment wasn't as impactful as you'd hope for, right? Just those bigger kind of overarching things that I think as a producer, we hyper focus on, but you can kind of like, I don't know, I guess imagine what it would be like to listen to your music for the first time that way. I just find it to be really helpful sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. That space is great. Once in a while, I have all my music on my phone and it's mixed in with everything else. And I'll go on shuffle once in a while and something will come on. I'm like, hey, what's this? And I'm like, oh, I did this.
It's like, oh, this is me.
Cool. Like, why didn't I ever stick with this? Why didn't I work on this more? And a lot of times it's because like something in me decided it wasn't good enough. And the fresh perspective, lets you just see it differently.
Totally.
Refreshes you a little bit.
Yeah.
That's going to be a hard thing though, because I'm assuming like with the school, you must have all kinds of levels of people coming in, right? Like from straight up beginners to probably people that are pretty far along that are looking to, reach the next level or something.
Yeah. I mean, we do sort of hyper focus on the more like intermediate to advanced producer, so we do have some solutions for people who are like absolutely beginners, but we kind of, ask and have denied people into the school that aren't like far enough kind of into their production journey, because what we're not is like, teaching you how to use a DAW, right? Like we kind of expect that you at least know the basics of Ableton or Logic or Cubase or FL, whatever it is that you're using, like, right? You should know how to like do automation and, work on the piano roll and do basic like chopping and audio warping, things like that. And finishing a few songs. They don't have to be good yet, but we do want you to be able to like, just like do the basics, because I think that allows us by just stating that, it allows us to kind of focus on the stuff that we're most passionate about. I love creating music, but I'm not the most passionate like Logic user. Like I don't get off on like telling people how to like find shortcuts. And is it cool sometimes to be able to help someone who just like had that aha moment? Like, of course, but that's not what I'm passionate about. What I'm passionate about is like, how do you take this idea, right? That's just like sitting in your DAW that could be an amazing, beautiful, like majestic piece. Like how do we get it to that commercial level of quality? And how do we get you replicating that and doing that over and over and over again so that you can create a body of work that you're truly proud of? Like that's what excites me. So I think, just kind of, and we do have, we have since created some solutions for people that like are completely new and want to take the Hyperbits Masterclass. Like there is something that we can give them at like no extra cost just to get them up to speed. But even then, it's like I'd recommend them like to work through that and spend like 3 to 6 months like minimum before starting the masterclass, because we do move pretty fast, and it's it's a pretty nerdy group. We get pretty technical and pretty intense on that side of things.
Well, that's good, because you don't want people that are just in the wrong place at the wrong time thinking like they don't have what it takes. Because that can happen, if you're trying to jump in a little deeper waters than you're ready to swim in.
Yeah, that is true. I do think that if you signed up for the class and found yourself in that situation and actually spoke to me or to the instructors, like we would say a few things to that type of person, because I don't believe that anyone like doesn't have what it takes. Like it's more just about, like where are you at, and like what are you struggling with right now? Because to me, creating a chord progression or a melody or something really exciting like that, maybe is a little bit more of an art form. But even that, right, you could get into the nooks and crannies of it and just like dial in as much like music theory and composition work as possible. And even then that becomes like a little bit of a science. But the mixing side, sound design, mixing, layering, like to me, that stuff is totally a science. Like anybody, you don't have to even be that musical, can actually learn how to create a great mix by using, all the tools at their disposal, and then the metering plugins and like your ears, right? Like learning how to train your ears to hear some of these things. But, and I'm not saying that there isn't an art form to mixing, because there's a lot of decisions that you can be making. But I believe that like literally anyone could actually learn how to proficiently become a mixer or mastering engineer, because it is more like, science than it is art.
Yeah, that's good too. That's the growth mindset, I guess, right? Like, where, I think I feel that way too, very strongly, again, because of how I started with music. Like I didn't know anything, and just doing it long enough, like, oh, now I know a little bit. So I think that's a lot of things in life that work that way. Totally. So listen, man, this has been a lot of fun. I don't want to keep you too long. It's been great talking to you. I really like the kind of like mental approach and the philosophical stuff that goes into like how you see stuff. Because
thanks, man.
I do think it's like 80% of the whole battle is just, understanding that stuff and having that in mind. It helps you finish projects. It helps you know when to take a break and when to, keep going. And they're important things that don't always come across in, your average tutorial where you're just learning how to like use this plugin and this is what this knob does and this is how to EQ a snare drum.
Well, those things are very necessary, right? But they don't really get you through that dark night of the soul, which We've all been there, and like, you know, there are things you can do, I think, to kind of maybe prevent that. Maybe not, you know, it'll still happen sometimes, but sometimes you just got to work through it. And I think you can really get out of it and put yourself into a really good space. And yeah, like that whole broken artist, like depressed, sad, like idea of an artist, like doesn't need to be a thing, right? Like you can be in a very optimistic, healthy, positive state and creating art on a regular basis. It just, you know, it just takes a little bit of work, takes a little practice.
Yeah. Well, that's helped me a lot too. You know, when I get to those points, inevitably, to just remember this is part of it. This is where the thrill really comes from. This is like, because I have hit rock bottom now and I have no belief in my abilities, and it gives you so much to like rise up to. But just to really be honest with yourself that like there is a grind to it. There is a difficult part. And, you know, doing this music production podcast therapy that I do often, I haven't talked to anybody that's like, you know, by now it's really pretty easy for me to do this. So I don't really run into any problems. I just make hit after hit and call it a day. Like no one says that. Everyone has a struggle with it. Everyone hits that dark night of the soul. And I think that also further separates the professionals from some of the amateurs, is that like the amateur maybe hits that dark night of the soul and then either gives up or gets harder on themselves or blames themselves or whatever. But the professionals just like know that that's going to come up and they know how to deal with it, like through their strategies and their tools. They probably have systems in place that like, just they're like, oh, when this happens, like I step away, right? And I work on a different idea for a while. Or when this happens, you know, I think back to like maybe some mantra, right? Or something. Like everyone's kind of got these like things in place that allow them to work through those tough moments because they're inevitable and we're all going to face them. So yeah, I think it really is important to kind of come up with some strategies to face that stuff when it does arise. Yeah, that's a good point. And just to think of it, it's almost like training, right? Like,
yeah,
what are you going to do when you hit that point? Like, where are you going to go? Like for me, a lot of times when I'm hitting the like I can't write any songs and my music is crap moment, that's when I go into like sound design stuff, or that's when I'll like organize my library or something, or do something that's not so much. Some of it's creative, but it's just different, you know. It's like, okay, so look, you're having trouble coming up with the lyrics or the arrangement here, so let's just make some sounds. Let's
that's a very like
other work that I have to do anyway. I'll edit the podcast now, you know.
That's a very like kind way to treat yourself, you know. So a lot of people would just get mad at themselves or berate themselves in those moments, and I think we all still sometimes do that. But yeah, you can totally just do different aspects of your work, or just go outside, right? Hang out with some friends. Like art inspires art. So to me, like when I'm truly not feeling inspired or not like wanting to do something, like I try to not force it anymore. And I'll just be like, you know what? Maybe it's time to go see a show. Maybe it's time to, I don't know, see a movie, right? Like something else that makes me maybe inspired or because nothing's better than that feeling of like being away from your computer or your DAW when you're like itching to get back to it, right? Like that's the emotion and vibe that we want to create. I think when we're consistently composing or creating music, we want to like be antsy to get back there. And if it's feeling like a drag and you don't want to be there, like, or you're just, you know, not into what you're creating, like that's kind of what you want to avoid, I would think.
Yeah, you're right. And sometimes that's like the best inspiration you can get.
Totally.
You can't squeeze it out of a rock. Sometimes you gotta go to the river, I guess. Well, let's see. We should send people to hyperbits.com, right?
Yeah,
that's where we can check you out.
Fresh URL. We've been hyperbitsmusic.com for the past, like, you know, when I started the website just as an artist project, it was hyperbitsmusic.com back for, I don't know, 10, 11 years now. And I have been emailing the owner of hyperbits.com every year for literally 10 years. And he finally gave in. So maybe that's a lesson in persistence, I guess. I don't know.
Nice.
But finally got hyperbits.com after all this time. So we just did that last week. Rolled it over.
Cool. Fantastic. Yeah, it makes it a little bit easier, right? A little less friction.
Yeah. It's honestly more of a thing, like a little, it's a big win for me. Pretty minuscule, I'm sure, to everybody else, but I'm very happy about it.
Well, the big wins, you got to celebrate all the wins, you know? Like,
yeah, man.
They're hard to come by sometimes. So that's cool though. That's just fits you guys a little bit easier. Yeah, I would tell anyone, if nothing else, just check out some of the blog posts. Like I said, I thought that one about Spotify playlist was like really thoughtful. Lots of detail and actionable items. It's, some blogs sometimes associated with websites are kind of there just to like get you to join or sign up or buy. And it wasn't like that at all from what I'm seeing. I think that's really nice that it's just good information you're just putting out there. And I think ultimately that gets more people to sign up anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of been like our strategy with the blog for a really long time now, like just write as much information about the things that interest me the most. And then hopefully like people will see that passion and that'll resonate with them and get them interested in, some of the things that we offered. But yeah, it's kind of, again, almost like naivete. Like if I knew how to actually write blog posts just for the purposes of like SEO or to gain organic traffic, like they wouldn't have ended up, I think, the way they are. Granted, I do know some of that stuff now, so we've learned some of those strategies. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm super proud of the blog, and really we have a ton of freebies as well that we've offered, just like sample packs, some workshops, so you can kind of, I guess, like gauge our learning style, the way we present information, some PDF and learning guides, videos, tutorials, all sorts of stuff on the site. So yeah, feel free to jump around and just dive in. There's a lot of good goodies on there.
Well, thanks so much, man. You shared a lot of great stuff. It was really nice talking to you, and I feel inspired myself now to go do some work. So that
nice.
To me is like the ultimate gift. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome, dude. Thanks for having me on. This was a blast. Yeah, I'm pumped to just be chatting about music. So hopefully we can do this again sometime.
That'd be great. That sounds fun. We could talk about maybe some of those all ages venues we both used to play back in the day when we were teenagers.
Yeah,
never crossed paths, but we lived on Long Island at the same time doing similar places. So that's fun.
Yeah, that's really
small
funny.
World thing going on.
Yeah, we played the Rock Lobster in Glen Head every month for like 3 years.
That's awesome.
Like,
yeah,
we were regulars. We were like that was like our residency.
Yeah, I love that place. It's just a great community place for kids to get together, do shows, and always good, friendly people.
Yeah, totally.
Kind of thing gives you hope in humanity. If you just let them do their thing and treat them like nice, sometimes really good things happen. And I think that was a good example. We had great times. No trouble ever.
Yeah. I recall a little bit of trouble, but I wasn't involved. It was never me. But yeah, I totally agree, man.
Well, cool, Serik. It was awesome talking to you. And everyone listening, go to hyperbits.com, check it out. And I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for listening.